This is Drew Baird from Moon Audio, and we're excited to be here with Gary Dayton from Bryston, and we're going to talk a little bit about the new fully active system. We're really excited. We've been waiting for the new big 21B amps so we can get out some of our older generation amps from other companies to use in this active system with the middle T's. Gary's going to go through the whole sort of signal path flow of how the whole active system works, and then we're going to go through some of the computer controlling aspects in a separate video.
For those of you who don't know, Bryston has been producing loudspeakers now for about 5 years, but just this year we've introduced our fully active loudspeaker system. Now, I think it's important to first draw a distinction between active loudspeakers and powered loudspeakers. The powered loudspeaker crowd, I think, has inappropriately co-opted the term active to describe loudspeakers that have amplifiers built in, and that's just not the case. So a powered loudspeaker would have an amplifier built into the back of the unit. An active loudspeaker may also be powered, in our case not. Active simply means that we've removed the crossover from the loudspeaker cabinet and we're producing the crossover function in a separate line level piece of equipment that is installed in the system before the amplifiers. That's how the Bryston system works. A Bryston active loudspeaker has no crossover components in the cabinet at all. That's all being done by our BAX1 outboard DSP crossover. Why would Bryston produce active loudspeakers? For years, loudspeaker engineers have been chasing the finest and best quality internal crossover components to go into a system. Read any advertisement for an audiophile loudspeaker and you'll find commentary about audiophile grade capacitors, specific brand capacitors, inductors wound in certain ways, specific resistors used in the crossover. That's because everyone acknowledges that crossover components have a very influential aspect on the sound quality of the final loudspeaker. And that makes sense. Loudspeaker engineers go to great lengths, ours included, to design the best quality drivers possible, so any influence those crossover components have on the final sound of the speaker is resolved by those drivers. We went down that road as well, using fine quality components in our crossovers, and still do. But our engineers thought, if we take those components out, if we can have a perfectly transparent crossover that has absolutely no influence on the sound of the loudspeaker, can we get better sound? The answer is yes. Can we also look at the crossover as an opportunity to fix nonlinearities in the response of the loudspeaker that we otherwise could not correct in the loudspeaker? Yes, we can do that as well. The Bryston BAX1 is our outboard crossover that lets us perfectly linearize the response of the loudspeaker and have absolutely no influence on the output sound of the final loudspeaker product.
And if I understand it correctly, depending on which pair of active speakers you go with, whether the middle T or the signature T or the smaller mini T, the bottom line is that you've set up the crossover to influence that particular speaker that you buy with the crossover. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, Bryston offers 3 models of active loudspeaker. The middle T here beside us may well be the most popular. We also offer a larger full-scale Model T, which can play from 20 Hertz all the way up to 20K, and then a large format bookshelf, the Mini T, can be used. Each of these 3 models uses the same BAX1 crossover, but as a user, when you set your system up for the first time, you program the BAX1 simply with the click of a button or a tap on your iPad to choose which model filters are activated on the BAX1.
So let's go through the signal path of what's going on here in the system.
Like normal, any source component in the system is connected directly to the preamplifier. So in this case, we're using the BP17 cubed. Our digital front end, the BDP3 and BDA3, feed an input on the BP17 cubed. Unlike a typical system, the output from the preamplifier does not feed the amps directly. Run a pair of balanced analog cables to the BAX1. The BAX1 creates the crossover function for the loudspeakers. So in other words, the one input in generates 3 outputs from the BAX1. Now those are low, mid, and high. So for each channel, left and right, the BAX1 generates 3 signals. From those 3 signals, we need to feed 6 channels of amplification. With the Bryston Active system, there are many different ways to create an appropriate amplifier package for your loudspeakers. You can use some of Bryston's specialty active loudspeaker amplifiers. In this case, we have a pair of 21Bs. The 21B is a unique amplifier because not only is it 3-channel, which is unusual, but the power is asymmetric. Each 21B has a 600 watt channel for the bass section, also a pair of 300 watt channels for the mid-range and high frequency. So a pair of 21Bs can be thought of like 3-channel mono blocks. Each loudspeaker gets an amp. Each amplifier has 3 channels for the 3 ways in the speaker, and has an enormous amount of dynamic range for listeners who like to listen very loud or who have a particularly large listening room. For somebody that doesn't have the space or doesn't want to go to the expense of the 21Bs, we offer a 6-channel model. That's the new Bryston 24B Cubed. The 24B Cubed has a pair of 300 watt channels to drive the bass section and 4 75 watt channels which can drive the mid-range and high frequencies. So 6 channels of amplification I think is a lot for people to swallow when they're used to a typical 2-channel system with a pair of amplifier channels. What if you want to buy a pair of passive middle T's today or passive mini T's with the thought of maybe upgrading to active in the future? Well, you can definitely do that. A pair of passive middle T's today, for instance, can be driven with a traditional Bryston 2-channel amp like the 4B. If you want to upgrade to active in the future, we can send you a bypass kit to install in your loudspeaker to bypass the internal passive crossover. You can add 4 more amplifier channels to your existing 4B to power the mid-range and the high frequency and not have wasted a single dollar on your initial investment.
And realistically, you don't necessarily have to go with the 2 larger 21B models on these speakers. These are actually pretty efficient, and you can get away with that one 6-channel amplifier in one chassis. But when you're trying to squeeze out every last drop of performance, then this is the way to go.
Bryston loudspeakers have been designed to be extremely dynamic. Regardless of the output level, Bryston loudspeakers have the exact same response. To take advantage of that dynamic range, you need to have an appropriate amount of power available. So if you have a large room and you like to listen at very high output levels, or even if you listen to very dynamic music, an amplifier like the 21B that gives you 600 watts for the bass section and 300 watts for each mid-range and tweeter is definitely the appropriate choice. If you're in a smaller room or you don't listen at really ambitious levels, a 6-channel model like the 24B that has a little less power available is a great choice as well. But remember, unlike other active loudspeaker solutions, you can always put together your own amplifier complement with Bryston's selection of monoblock and stereo and multi-channel amplifiers. You can also take advantage of amplification that you already own.
So now what we're going to do is do some room corrections. We're going to jump over to another video where we are going to show you the computer interface for the crossover and how to set up all the settings after you've done the measurement. The measurements are pretty easy and will be covered well in the manual.